Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and today we're going to try out something a little bit new. We are going to be doing similar to our weekly meta breakdown in terms of the best performing decks on the arena ladder. We're going to be looking at kind of a weekend look at some unique decks that are positive win rates, so better than 50%, across various tournaments being held online, kind of showcasing new decks, kind of new ideas, stuff like that. Really give you something on the weekend if you want to try out a new brew, something like that. If you don't want to be playing just black-white mid-range into mono-white aggro all the time, give you some variety with that. So we're getting these deck lists from MTG Melee, which is kind of the online tournament host. It organizes, you can play in a bunch of tournaments, some are free, some are paid for, and there's prizing and stuff like that. So these decks, like I said, they all have at least a positive win rate. I'll link all the deck lists in the video description so you can see how they did exactly, and import the decks, look at any of the cards over, stuff like that. So starting off, there was a Japanese tournament overnight. For record, just for point of context, this is on February 26th, so Saturday afternoon, just so you can kind of benchmark, you'll see when the tournament was held. But this is a Gruul Modify list, so it's actually a pretty sweet deck. It's kind of built around Thundering Raiju. So it's a 4-mana creature, haste when it enters the battlefield. Sorry, when it attacks, you get to put a 1/1 counter on another creature you control, and then you get to drain your opponent based on, or deal damage. Important kind of differentiation against some decks. Deal damage based on the number of other modified creatures. So pretty much everything in this deck's looking to be modified in some way. So you can kind of pump the jams. You have Ornreef Ooze, which puts counters on things to modify them and then adds more counters onto them. You have Goldspan, which is just kind of a good engine card, gets evasive, feeds you mana. Shatter Skull Charger, Trample Haste. If it was kicked, it enters with the battlefield with 1/1 counters. Kind of a cool way to play around this is you could play the Charger and then put the counters on it with Raiju, and then it stays on the battlefield. So it's a pretty good rate then. You'd basically be getting a 3-mana 5/4 Trample Haste. You have Upriser, Renegade, a new card from Kamigawa, 2-mana, 1/3, and it gets +2/0 for each other modified creature you control. So kind of a way to buff up that. Swarm Shambler, just a way to leave you tokens behind, kind of scales up. You have Kamana, which is a creature in the long run, but also Sega 2, lets you put counters on things. Rangers class puts counters on things. Cool thing is Invigorating Hot Spring. It's an enchantment, kind of fires of Yavimaya-esque in its ability. So 3 mana, when it enters the battlefield, it enters the battlefield with 4 1/1 counters on it, and then you can remove a 1/1 counter on Hot Spring, and then you can put it on target creature you control. You can only do this once per turn, but any modified creatures you control get haste, so basically everything in your deck has haste for the most part. There's a lot of creatures that enter with the counters, but other ways to kind of buff them up that way. Similarly with Chariot, kind of make you tokens. And then Kami's Flare is actually a pretty solid card in terms of the rate. It's kind of that like 2-mana, 3 damage spell. But if you have a modified creature, it also deals 2 damage to its controller. So shock the face, kill a creature, seems pretty good rate all around. You got some Layers of the Hydra and a Den of the Bugbear to wrap it up with some Boseiju and the Sokuzan Channel Lens, as well as some Shatter Skull Smashings. And then your sideboard, you got stuff like Arlen, Chandra, kind of grindier for the control matchups, along with Bankbuster, safekeeping to protect yourself. You got a removal package and Burning Hang, Cinderclasm, and Kami. Cinderclasm, most of your creatures kind of scale above like the weenie decks, so a good card there against like Wedding Announcement tokens, stuff like that. And then Liberator, just to blow up artifacts or enchantments. Next deck also from this Japanese tournament. It's a Golgari midrange list. So not a Blood on the Snow list, kind of just a rock style deck. You have Ramp in the form of Emergent Sequence. You have Dig Up, which can find you land early game, but you can cleave it late game for specific kind of tutor effects. You also have Bindings of the Old God as a removal and ramp card. Lots of removal in this deck in a variety of forms. Bloodchief, Soul Shatter, Infernal Grasp, Crippling Fear, as well as Soul Transfer. And then you have just kind of disruptive elements. You got Concealing Curtains to attack your opponent's hand, good value creatures, Tainted Adversary, Briarback Tracker, And then you got the Chariot that can run away with games. You got the Chariot Ren package to try to make as many copies of Tree Folk as possible. Copy of Lulth, and then kind of cool Dreadfast Demon. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a non-demon creature. If you do, create a copy of Dreadfast Demon. So, you know, Chariot tokens, a zombie token with decay, any of these other small creatures, your land kind of plays into that, and you just get big 6/6 flyers. In the sideboard, you got like Shade versus the control matchups, just the more interactive ones, put some pressure on them. Storm for the grindier matchups. Then you got a lot of control elements, Shadow's Verdict, Culling Ritual, Blood Chiefs, Soul Shatter Infernal, just kind of buffing up more removal. You got some Duress as well for the control matchups, as well as Go Blank. It's kind of a cool black-green mid-range shell. Next up, this is from the GG Tour Set Champion. This tournament's still going on, so it's a little bit early. I think there's 3 rounds when I was looking at this. But kind of took a quick skim. There's a lot of like your usual suspects in the kind of top Jeskai, black-white control, tempo-y, mid-range, mono-white, various kind of Naya-esque mono-white decks as well in there. But this is a mono-blue tempo list that looked pretty sweet. So it's like a Delver Secret, Spectral Adversary, Ascended Spirit. Then you have a bunch of counters, bounce effects. You got Into the Royal, Fading Hope to kind of tempo your opponent. Bunch of counters, Essence Capture, Test, Negate, Disdainful Stroke, Saw Coming. Thirst lets you kind of churn through the bad cards of your deck. And then you have like the top end of Ilmarith, and then you got your Hall of the Storm Giants as well. Sideboard, you got Dragon Turtles for kind of the counter, big blocker body, Malvin Hermit for the more removal heavy decks. Then you just got a mix of counter spells, the Stroke, Negate, Tests, Reject for the creature matchups, as well as Essence Scatter and Spell Pierce. So you're kind of limited with your options in terms of actual removal. So you're kind of just tailoring your counter spells to assist in those matchups there. The interesting thing here, you do have 8 bounce spells, really 9 with Otawara, Soaring City, the land, but how kind of this deck plays from behind. Like if you can get a Delver, flip it, kind of go to town, you might be okay, but if your opponent sneaks through a couple things, you might be a little bit far behind, but interesting deck nonetheless. Speaking of tempo decks, we have a Dimir Rogues list. So kind of a cool leveraging Kato Suzuki to draw you cards, get you like ninjas, unblockable creatures. You have Silver Fur Master, which is a lord for your rogues and ninjas. In this case here, you're really just playing it for the rogue side, other than the ninjas from Suzuki. But you're kind of like a tempo-y, some flash elements in there as well. You got like Spectral Adversary. You have the package of like Wind Robber, Soaring Thought Thief. This one's playing Nighthawk, Scavenger as well as a big body. Flash and Even Death. Stowaway's a rogue as well, which gets the buff. So kind of cool like that. Not really like ninjutsu value, but you could kind of play around with things. In a pinch, you could protect stuff, kind of go from there. This version, unlike the mono blue version, you have hard removal. So they're opting for 3 Infernal Grasp, but you have stuff like Crippling Fear, Power Word Kill in the sideboard. You still have your tempo cards and like Disdainful Stroke, Jawari, Negate, Fading Hope. And then you have more counters in the post board along with Malvin Hermit. And then they're opting for like Henrika for like the more aggressive decks for Lifelink. And then, like I said, Crippling Fear as a way to sweep up. And then lastly, Bant Control. This was another kind of cool deck that stood out. I don't know how good it is with Koma, just there's a lot of exile removal going around the format. But kind of a control-y deck that I think is more of a metagame call than anything. And the card that sticks out to me as being a metagame call, oh, wrong way, okay, is Plummet. So there's a lot of Goldspan, like Jeskai combos, as well as Hinata, Magma Opus. So this is just kind of a concession to those decks where you play Plummet main board. That's just a clean answer for those creatures. So kind of cool there. I wouldn't play Plummet on the ladder. I think it's too narrow. There's too much diversity. But you have like Disruptive Protocol. You have artifacts in the form of Bankbuster and Celestis, which can reduce kind of neutral with Celestis, but you can also tap your Chariot in a pinch to allow you to counter for 2 mana. This has the removal package of 3 farewells only. So it's good and bad. Like, you do have some artifacts in the Chariot, Celestis, Reckoner, but you have like control-y cards like Sunset Revelry, you have some flash elements, you have like Wandering Emperor, Hullbreaker on the top end, Spectral Sailor, so it's kind of more of a mid-rangey deck, but I thought this was kind of cool. You have like Spell Pierce, some Fading Hopes, thought kind of cool, like different type of deck. Yasharns for like the treasury style decks, Hermits against any kind of blue control based deck, Vanquish as another sweeper. This is interesting. I probably would prefer Doomscar. Like, Vanquish does have a cost where your opponent, if they just play around sweepers effectively, this ends up just being overcosted, where Doomscar can be a 3-mana sweeper. Another Revelry versus aggro decks, Fateful Absence. Like, on the ladder, I would probably just move these Fateful Absence main, just to make sure you always have a live card. Negates, tests, and then Tamiyo's Safekeeping as protection for your stuff. So those are some decks. I'll kind of do these every so often, just pulling up if there's some cool lists, whether it be Historic, Alchemy, or Standard. Just give you some more options over the weekend on decks you can play. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you do enjoy this type of content, this meta content, we come up with a video every single week for each of the arena formats. We get ladder data in terms of the best performing win rates and decks like that from Untapped GG. So we go through each week and kind of talk about trends, new emerging decks that have fallen by the wayside. So if you want to be like kind of top notch, know what people are playing in Mythic, you want to up your game, definitely follow the channel, subscribe. We come up with those videos every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on formats. And there's just a lot of meta discussion. We also do gameplay on the channel, kind of showcasing a lot of the decks as well. So if you want to see these decks in action, take a look at the channel. Typically I'm always playing mid to high Mythic. Like yesterday we were up in like the 600s, 700s, testing out brews like Fire of Invention brews that was just unbanned, as well as some standard decks as well this past weekend. But let me know what you think in the comments, if you've tried out any of these decks, how they work out for you, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.